welcome to the Soft Rebellion podcast, a homecoming to the creative power of your female body. Our world uproots us from the gifts of the feminine, the intuitive, the instinctual, the cyclical, the soft. What's the result? Patriarchal cultures of perfectionism, shame, and disconnect that leave us constantly running, never arriving. Imagine a world of women softly rebelling, claiming our cyclicity, our weirdness, and our rest as we each courageously cultivate a deep and delicious relationship to our female bodies. My name is Flurina. I'm an osteopath, dancer, writer, and coach. I've been on my own journey sparked by an eating disorder to come home to the wild, poetic anatomy of my female body and awaken my creative power. And I invite you to join me and my guests, trailblazing teachers, healers, and creatives as we each reclaim our own soft rebellion. Just a tiny retrospective side note, I have forgotten to plug in my microphone, hence in this episode the audio quality is not as good as it could be, and next time I'll be back on track and I shall remember. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm glad and honored and happy that you are here. So in this episode today, I share with you how discovering menstrual cycle awareness has helped me to not continuously burn myself out. I have always felt so passionate for my studies and work that I often pushed myself too hard as I missed the subtle signs of my body saying, "Stop, we need a break." And in fact, for the longer time of my life, I resisted any type of break. I would feel guilty during my holidays. I would get up at 6 a.m. on Sundays and literally constantly felt chasen by the fear of not having achieved enough. And the result, you may guess, was that I would burn out over and over again. And I felt so bloody tired of it. But I didn't know how to change this pattern. I literally remember how I felt so stuck and caught by that pattern. Like I said, chasen. And yeah, does that sound familiar to you? And meeting menstrual cycle awareness in my mid-20s had a huge impact upon my life. Suddenly I had a tool to read this rise and fall of energy which my body goes through every month, and responding to these shifts in energy helped me hugely to maintain what we call in osteopathy the voltage in my own batteries and to sustain a healthy lifestyle. So this episode is for you if you are ready to stop pushing against and ignoring your body's messages, but lean into the breath of your own cycle to surf the waves of rise and fall and emerge into your rest and source of creativity. You might be totally new to menstrual cycle awareness or already practicing MCA on a regular basis. Use this episode to deepen your relationship to your cycle and maybe get different or new inputs on how to meet your cycle. Maybe you find yourself in a moment of feeling burned out right now. And I want to say I hear you and I feel you and I hold you through this podcast. May this episode give you hope and inspiration on how to view the situation you find yourself in with maybe very new eyes. And maybe you find yourself in a high of creative energy, in the midst of joyful production and at ease. And that's wonderful. Enjoy it. And enjoy listening as much inside as you listen to the outside, and notice when your own body asks you to slow down and take a break. Wherever you're coming from, I so honor you taking the time listening to me and taking this time for you. And right now, I'm sending you so much love. And just before we really dive in, I would like to name a few things. The menstrual cycle, your menstrual period or your menstruation might have been so far a mainly painful and uncomfortable experience. Like me, you might have experienced many moments of burned out and have tried all kinds of coaching and therapies, and you might feel hopeless or frustrated about all those past experiences. You might feel ashamed, disconnected, and embarrassed about and to your own body. And the idea to reconnect and attend to your body and its subtle signs with even more attention might right now sound scary, and the very thought of it might be triggering. And I want to acknowledge all of that too. So let's dive in. The topic I talk about today is very dear, and I want to say very tender to my own heart. It's such a thin line I keep balancing in my own life. I get better and better, and I do not yet master it. And this episode therefore feels very much like as if I'm opening a window, a very present and again tender and a very recent also window into my own life, and I share my very lived experience with you. I'm on day 10 of my cycle today, inner spring, and I had a very challenging bleed. I felt exhausted, and yet there was a lot to organize and to think about, and I just did not manage to surrender and rest as much as my body and my heart would have needed and wanted. And I still feel the pain, the frustration, and I almost felt a little bit a sense of that old pattern of always doing, always pushing myself, and already fear how I run into a burnout. And this is why I'm recording this episode today. For me, this pattern of always doing, always pushing really started when I went to school, or when I started to go to school. Before I went to primary school, I was held in a really loving, peaceful and safe family environment, and I knew that I could rest, I would rest, and I just knew that I was good enough. And somehow when I went to school, that's where I started to grow up with, or grow into this fear of, I can't do this, I can't do this. And this big fear of, what if I'm not good enough? What if I'm the only one who can't do this task or this, write this, whatever, which really is kind of a topic for a whole other episode. But why I mentioned that is because my learned reaction to this pattern was to make sure to work so hard that at least my efforts would be seen and acknowledged, as if I had to prove that my not being good enough wasn't due to laziness. And how crazy is that? As if I try to say I know, as if I try to reaffirm and assure, I know I'm not good enough, but look, I work very hard. This was my reaction to that fear, which was suddenly there when I went to school and someone told me, this is right, this is wrong. There was the fear born, therefore I'm not good enough, and therefore I need to work so hard that I can say, wow, I know I'm not good enough, but this is not because I'm lazy. And yeah, here I grew up working very hard, getting a task, meeting a new challenge and immediately throw myself into working very, very hard. And this pattern really, wow, that's how I lived my primary school years. I remember many moments when I would not go out and play or would not go to that children's party or whatever, because I felt this forced urge of I have to work very hard to be good enough. I can't allow myself joy or pleasure or rest. I very much lived this theme and rhythm also in secondary school. More and more kind of became a person where it was always about all or nothing. I would either completely thrive in something or not even do it. I would either be the best in this performance or the best in this project or the best in this craft or whatever, or not even try it. And oh my word, it was so exhausting. And yeah, for the longer time of my life, that's how I lived my life. I'm now 30 and 31, and when I was 15, I was in the midst of burning myself into and out of those patterns. For me, it became so easy to say no to pleasure, and that strikes me right now. It became so easy to say no to pleasure, and it was so easy to say yes, to be hard and tough upon myself, and to say yes to more and more and more work. And then, of course, if you follow me for a while, if you've listened to old episodes, I always wanted to become a dancer, and I then went on, and after I did my, I think it's kind of A levels compared to UK, I went on and I studied dance. I went to Copenhagen, and then I went to the Netherlands, and I enrolled in a undergrads in contemporary dance and performance. And yeah, isn't that fascinating? Now all my practice and all my studies really involved all of my body. When I started to study dance, I wasn't just using my cognitive mind, which it felt I was before, but now I was really all my body, my flesh, my bones, my physical being was so involved in my work, in my studies, in my deed. And you know what? I approached it with the same pattern. Go, go, go. My body was talking to me in so many ways. Mainly in pain, in back pain, in knee pain, in headaches, in insomnia, meaning difficulties to sleep. It went so far, I took sleeping pills as a routine to give my body rest. And of course, it talked to me in the expression of an eating disorder. And I won't go into the depth of this story. I've recorded 2 full episodes about that, about this part of my story. I linked that in the episode. I heard my body and I kept pushing myself. I literally had no sense for what rest means. And you know, I always felt close to nature. I grew up close to nature, and yet I had no sense about, or I had no really embodied sense, or I had no sense within myself of nature. Now that I talk to you, I notice, wow, I've spent so much time outside as a child, and later, and nature is very meaningful to me. And I, at that time, because society, that's how it feels, pushed me so much into this pattern of go, 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 be on 24/7, I had no real embodied sense of spring and autumn, summer and winter, of what it means to grow and rest. I only felt my fear pushing myself. I only felt my fear which pushed myself forwards constantly. At that time, I also had a very poor sense of literally my physical back. That I talked about that in the last episode, how powerful it is neurologically to rest on our back, to lean into our back, to touch your backside, to feel your back. So yeah, here I was training dance, trained to become a dancer. I worked so deeply with my body and moved away from it at the same time. I felt more fearful, more worried, more anxious. The more time went on, the more I was going to that dance school. With every day I felt more fearful, more worried, more anxious. And with every day I felt more resistance to go to university, until I literally couldn't anymore. I remember that morning, it was a big effort to pack my training bag, to cycle there. My steps were heavy. Approaching a school building, I opened the door and it was so literal. I couldn't step my foot into the building. I had to turn my back and walk away. I sat down underneath a tree, nature, and burst out into tears. I had burned myself out completely. It was awful and it was painful. And if that is where you right now find yourself in as well, I hold you so tenderly to my own heart. I look into your eyes and I want to say, I feel you. You're not alone. Right now you might not see it, and there is a huge gift in it, and there is a way to health again. So, without talking too much about my suffering now, but I wanted to lay out how I got there and why I record this whole episode. With a lot of support, I got back up. I recovered. Of course, I took a break. I've rested. And I, maybe a year later, embarked on new studies. I started studying osteopathy. And to keep a long story now much shorter, exactly the same happened again. By the end, in my first year, I didn't give myself a massive break and I burnt myself out again. And the same happens by the end of my studies. I've studied, it was 4 intense years, and it would really have been the time to give myself a long summer break, looking back in time, not just 4 or 5 weeks, but a long break before I embark on a whole new adventure and step into practice. But the fear of not being good enough, poof, made me just throw myself into working. And after half a year, here it happened again. I had burned myself out. And I had to quit one of my jobs again and really reorganize my life. And that, let's say, third real burnout was, that was when I really reflected and when things came together. And amongst others, one of the magical things, big magic, Elizabeth Gilbert would say, was that a friend of mine gave me on my following birthday, gave me a book called Back to the Roots. That's a book written by a Swiss author, and it sadly only exists in German, but there are very similar books in English. The one which I'm going to link is the one called Wild Power from Alexandra Pope and Jani Wurlitzer. And with meeting that book, Back to the Roots, or way before you, with meeting the book Wild Power, I met MCA, Menstrual Cycle Awareness. And that was such a huge game changer moment in and for my own life. Menstrual cycle awareness became my most poetic and my most pragmatic practice. It became my spiritual practice. It kind of completely changed my view and thought and opinion and felt sense about what spiritual practice means. It became my best friend, my daily companion. it became so powerful to know every day on what cycle day I am on. Since then, I often have no bloody clue what state we are on, and I actually get it wrong way more often. But I always know what cycle day I'm on, and it's so powerful, it's so joyful. And actually yesterday evening, when I was leaning into recording this episode, as I thought how, wow, sister, since I practice menstrual cycle awareness, my life became more exciting. I'm in a cycle, and I already feel this excitement for what my next cycle might bring. Suddenly I can really lean into the uniqueness and the gift and the surprise and the unexpectedness and the newness, the freshness of every day. My life has become so more colorful, and I'm much more consciously grateful and leaning into the gratefulness for that, and that has changed a lot. So this episode is about how menstrual cycle awareness is now a tool of not burning ourselves out over and over again. So let me tell you in a little bit more depth what changed and what I learned. And for that, I maybe need to take a little step back. Of course, on one level, my life has always been about studying the body and movement, etc. And as a dancer, but especially as an osteopath, in that process of becoming an osteopath, I'm so aware, and I work a lot with patients and with my own breath. Right? Inhale, exhale, breathing in, breathing out, this process of a filling and an emptying of literally air in my body, but also a filling and emptying of every cell, really, a rise in volume and a fall in volume. This cycle of filling and emptying, which happens again as we breathe in and as we breathe out, but which also happens as osteopaths. We learn about kind of cycles within cycles of breath. We call that a small tide, a long tide. There are different rhythms of breath happening of our body, which as an osteopath, at the same time, we learn to palpate. This is very, very subtle. And if we practice this palpation, we suddenly notice, there is not just my actual breath, thoracic respiration, there is not just air flowing in and out. Actually, every cell is exerting or performing a motion of expanding and contracting. Every cell is breathing, and there is this whole, what should I call it, energetic, universal breath tide, also a filling and an emptying, which is washing, running, operating through me. So as an osteopath, I became very aware of that, of these cycles of inhale and exhale, of filling, of emptying, of a rise and of a fall in volume and in energy. And I've really noticed that it needs both the inhale and the exhale. And there I refer again to the thoracic respiration, to your actual breath, because what I've really learned and noticed in the last 4 years is that actually, if I fully allow my body to exhale, then the inhale happens automatically. Our job is to get out of the way of our breathing. Our breath is a divine, magic, perfect dance. Our breath knows exactly what it's meant to do. If we get out of the way, I need to get out of the way for my breath to move my body and to literally fuel my life effortlessly. My breath knows, my body knows. And I think, this is simple and profound. Our job is not to effortlessly breathe in and make sure we breathe in, then we start to panic. Our job is to allow the exhale to fully leave your body, and almost attending, noticing, celebrating that little pause at the end of your exhale. Because then the inhale just flows with so much ease and so much potent energy. So, as an osteopath, I've learned that life is motion and health is motion. And every cell, every tissue in our body expresses motion. Every cell expresses that expansion and contraction, and that's a breath. And now, give me 1 second. I was just on a So I had to take this step back, because our cycle, our menstrual cycle, connects us deeper, connects us women deeper and from anew to the source of energy and to the source of creativity and to the source of breath. If we notice its blueprint and its dance. So for today, I want to share with you that menstrual cycle awareness really helped me not to burn myself out again, because I noticed, wow, my menstrual cycle over the length of a month is another breath cycle. This is another cycle of inhale and exhale. Wow. So I can lean into this, and if I do trust and connect with that rhythm, it effortlessly carries me through a filling, a rise in energy, and an emptying, a letting go, a surrender, a pause, which is where I monthly rejuvenate, rest, recover, and not burn myself out. So what do I mean with that? Your menstrual cycle has 2 poles, right? If it's a circular cycle, it has 2 poles. One pole, let's call it the North Pole, is menstruation, is your bleed. That's, in menstrual cycle awareness language, your inner winter. The other pole, on its opposite end, the South Pole, is ovulation. It's your inner summer in menstrual cycle awareness language. It's where you ovulate. In terms of hormones and in terms of energy levels, your body physiology is in a completely different place on both those poles. But poles, polarities, yin and yang, right? It's not opposites, it's poles, it's polarities. They need each other to create the whole, and both of them nurture each other. Does this make sense? We don't just have a yin aspect of us, right? Our feminine side is nurtured by our masculine energies, and so are our masculine energies nurtured by our feminine, and we need both dancing with each other to be a whole and to really go forwards with all of our faculties on board. So your menstrual cycle, on one end there is menstruation, your inner winter. That's where energetically or just physiologically, yes, you come to a low in the energy your system has to you, offers to you, and provides for you to run your life in that moment. And you have ovulation, where you experience a natural high in energy. And that, of course, has to do with your hormones. I'm not going to go into huge depth of that. That could again be another episode, the wild and poetic anatomy of your hormonal cycle. But of course, this has all to do, to put it very simply, with estrogen and progesterone, the first half of your cycle. And Macy Hill, in her book called Period Power, calls it the Beyoncé hormone, which I quite like. In the Beyoncé hormone, in the first in the first half of your cycle, that's where your body is really run by estrogen. That's your estrogen phase. That's your inner spring and inner summer. That's where you have naturally lots of power and energy. That's an inhale, your whole body being your cycle, the whole of you takes a breath. You breathe in, you look outwards, you turn on all these lights in the outside, you bring yourself into the world, you have ideas, you realize that these ideas, you take the stage, etc. That's the inhale phase. You step out, you go into action. But in summer, you are superwoman for around 10 days, Alexandra says, and then adios and see you next time. Because the nature of your cycle shifts, changes. All the hormones shifts. The estrogen comes to an end and progesterone becomes the dominant hormone. And your energy falls within the second half of your cycle, your autumn, your winter. Your energy naturally starts to fall because there is a change in your body physiology, your hormones change. You start to slow down. This is the exhale phase. Your whole cycle, breathe out until you come to the lowest point. Summer, actually, between autumn and winter, and you emerge into your bleed, your inner winter, which is where you are meant to rest, which is where we get to the end of the exhale, which means, I said that before, if we fully exhale, there is actually a pause. There is actually a moment of complete surrender, of complete stillness, of complete emptiness. And when I notice that, wow, like my breath cycle, my menstrual cycle carries me through a big inhale, through a big exhale. And if I start to listen to the exhale, if I start to listen to the slow down of my body in autumn and winter, actually it just really pulls me into that moment of complete emptiness, stillness, and so rejuvenating rest if I dare and allow to surrender. So this is how menstrual cycle awareness helped me to understand when my body is at a natural high and when it is at a natural low, and that there is no hierarchy between any phase of my cycle. And there, of course, there is no goal either, but that living fully through the gifts of every single phase feeds the next, and as a whole so deeply nurtures myself. And I just want to say, hey, my friend, sister, love, we have this amazing mechanism in our body which so powerfully invites us to shamelessly surrender and rest, and helps us not to forget to rest. We have this natural mechanism which not just reminds us, but gives us this sanctuary of so mystical and profound rest. So hey, use it. If we fully surrender to MCA, I truly believe we no longer burn ourselves out, as we monthly recharge, rejuvenate, and attend to where we want, to where we want, too quick, too far, to where we usually are, too quick, too fast, too blind. And you know, recording this episode is a recommitment for myself to really dare to follow the exhale of my cycle. I'm usually very good in following the inhale, and it feels easier, but we can't keep dancing the inhale if we don't drop into that pause at the end of the exhale. And now I have to laugh because, right, this is what this podcast is about. In the intro I always say that The soft rebellion is she who emerges into a rest. We can't be on 24/7. And yes, it needs so much courage, so incredibly much courage to let go once a month, to let go of the to-do list, to let go of your own business, of any agendas, to let go of shoulds and musts, and trust that immense emptiness which is awaiting you. It is a mystical place, a place we don't meet every day, and a place which nurtures us deeply if we do surrender in our inner winter. Because, in inner winter, there is also this amazing hormone called oxytocin, and we are flooded with oxytocin. That's the love hormone, with love, with inner knowing, and with a grounding anchor. So that's the teaching I wanted to, teaching sounds a bit, that's the sharing I wanted to share with you. And where to start? So today's invitation is, if you're not already doing it, then I would highly encourage you, the next time when you are on day 1 of your bleed, that's day 1 of your cycle, and maybe the beginning is to simply start to track your cycle, to write down, I'm on day 1, I'm on day 2, now day 3, to know what cycle day you are on. And maybe write 3 sentences or 3 words on how you feel, so that you start to be able to read your own pattern and needs and desires. And really, if you do that for today or for the next 3 cycles, the invitation is to simply notice that overarching energy pattern of your cycle, to notice this inhale and exhale of your cycle. Mark in your calendar the first half of your cycle and mark the second half of your cycle. Can you feel a build-up? And can you notice how your whole being wants to expand into the world? And can you feel and go with the desire to then slow down? How do you feel when you arrive at menstruation after you have had paid attention beforehand? And as always, apply the 1% rule. For the next couple of cycles, what is that 1% you can do less on the exhale phase? What is that 1% you can slow down? Uncovering the blueprint of your cycle happens cycle by cycle. You don't need to uncover and lift the whole of it next month. Cycle by cycle, just uncover that beautiful blueprint, which has so much to teach you to do a little bit more. This cycle which is always there, this wonderful rise and fall in energy. Its momentum invites you to dance with it and thrive through it, and on it if you dare to listen. And there is still the offer for you to go onto my webpage and sign up for my free mini course and listen to 3 further videos where I share with you about lots of tools and practices, in particular how we can move from body shame and disconnect to joy and into the creative power into the fullness of our creative power. And that's where I talk more about MCA. And go and use that, because I'm actually already dreaming into a new free offer which will replace the one which is there now, and yet it's a juicy one, so go and enjoy that. And I want to thank you so much for being with me today, and I would love to hear your takeaways and how this episode was for you. You can always tag me on social media at Flurina Thali, or you can actually just write me an email. That's softrebellion@flurinathali.com. I would love to hear from you, and I really mean that. The Soft Rebellion is a movement which is already existing but found a new language through me, and this means I want this to be a dance with you and a conversation. And I so stress that. I would love to hear from you. Send this email right now and let me know what is your takeaway, and let me know also if you would like to be a guest on my podcast. Let me know what your Soft Rebellion journey is about, what you have to share with the women in our community, and or let me know who you would like me to be on the podcast. And as always, the second wish is do forward this episode to anyone who you think would really be interested in hearing that. And if you enjoy this episode, then please do leave a review, give me a follow. This helps me hugely to spread the soft rebellion. I'll be with you next week, and until then, go and be your unique and weird, wonderful self. Lots of love.